Welcome to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast, where we talk to IT marketing leaders about how to drive more sales. Hosted by Carlos Corredor, founder of Corredor, an Inc. 5000 company and one of the fastest growing IT marketing agencies in the US.
3, 2, 1, 0.
This episode is brought to you by Corredor, a digital marketing agency for mid-market B2B and tech services companies. Most B2B marketing teams struggle to drive sales, overwhelmed by long sales cycles and an elusive audience. Corredor helps you measure and generate qualified opportunities, make the most with your budget, and be recognized as a revenue driver instead of just a cost center. You can learn more at condoragency.com. And today we welcome Matt Fiel. He's the executive VP at Penrod, which is a boutique Salesforce consultant focused in the healthcare space. Matt and Penrod, they're based in Milwaukee. He has over 15 years of experience in different channels of marketing, strategy, web development, creating design, performance marketing, including, both organic and paid search and paid media. So, we'll have plenty to discuss. But first of all, welcome, Matt. Thanks for coming, and can you please expand or complete that intro that I did of you and of Penrod?
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. Yeah, what you said is accurate. My name is Matt Fiel. I work for Penrod, which is a Salesforce consultant focused on the healthcare industry. So throughout the course of my career, I've existed in marketing departments that are a little larger. In my current role, I've evolved to be a single marketing team, so handling all aspects of our outbound marketing strategy, including the website, different social strategies, paid ads, performance marketing, content writing, you name it, one-person marketing team. And I've definitely had a ton of experiences and looking forward to sharing anything that might be helpful for others out there.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks for expanding on that. And I think you got to, one of the main things that we wanted to discuss today, which is, an optimal team. I'm not going to talk even about a small team or a big team. I'm talking about a lean team, right? Where that's one person, or in some cases it could be 20, and it could be worth having 20. I think for mid-market companies, we're definitely more on the smaller side, right? But what have you learned in terms of how to build a lean team?
Yeah, so I think it starts with oftentimes, the size of your team. I often look at is going to be dictated by overall revenue or what your revenue goals are. So at specific revenue targets, you want like a certain percentage dedicated to a marketing team, whether that's, some people say it's 10%, some people will say it's 5% of revenue that's dedicated to your marketing team. So basically everything from that, whether it's headcount, you have to also include what sort of channels you're going to execute on. So what's your ad budget? What's your budget for website development, for content creation, everything like that. Add that all up, see what it comes out to in terms of the percentage of your revenue, so you're not overspending. And you'll really get, I think, a good idea of what your ideal team size should be. And from there, once you understand what your headcount is, you may be, in a place where you're working at a large enterprise company, or even a large, more mid-market company that has a high revenue count. So you might have more team members that you can add on that can specialize in certain things. But in cases where your revenue is a little lower, you might need to hire some unicorns, people who are good at content creation, web development, graphic design, things like that. I also take a look at, hey, where can I outsource certain things that I may not be good at or I may not be passionate about? That could be things like graphic design, could be things like content development. There's plenty of resources out there that I think that are more targeted to mid-market companies, very good pricing structures, almost like unlimited design work for the month. So also look at what you can outsource and save on cost there. But yeah, assembling the marketing team really comes down to what your budget projections are and what your goals are, and that's the way I look at it.
No, I think that's a great overview. I agree. I think usually, as you mentioned, anywhere from 5 to 10%, unless you have VC funding with some really crazy and aggressive goals, maybe you'll go above 10, maybe 15%, but that's rare, right? Most companies, if they're growing somewhat bootstrapped or more organically or with more ROI metrics and measurements, in the immediate uh, time frame, they are looking more at anywhere from 5, which tends to be on the low side, to 10%, which is, let's say, on the higher side. But let's say a company that is making $100 million a year in revenue, right? That gets you, let's round it up to $10 million in marketing budget for the year, right? And then there are, yeah, what you can bucket things into 4 main categories, which is your internal payroll, what you're spending, as you mentioned, your ad budget, uh, your contractors or agencies that you're working on, and then really it's your ad tech, right? So do you have, I don't know, ZoomInfo? Do you have a CRM? What other tools and technologies are you using, right?
Yeah, because I've been in situations in the past where the company overstaffed in marketing, and then there's very little budget to actually execute on the strategies, which really makes those individuals really unproductive. They probably get frustrated. They're not going to perform to their expectations of themselves and to management. So by overloading on headcount and not allocating enough funds for actually executing the tactics, you're going to get yourself into a ton of problems.
Mhm. I agree. I think that's the most common, um, let's call it a mistake in terms of budget allocation across those 4 categories, is over hiring internally, right? Over committing, right? So number one, and also, it's a lot of times you need a project done, and your first the first thing you do is go out and hire somebody, where you don't know if you're going to need that skill for a longer period of time than even 3 months, right? So nobody then wants to fire people. Then you start damaging your reputation as an employer, and it gets harder to bring more talent. So I agree that that's an error, and I think it's like traditionally that's a little bit of the corporate culture, right? Let's have everybody in the office that I can see them working and doing things. So it's also traditionally how problems have been solved since forever. I do think that has changed with specialization and with now remote work culture. But in other words, yeah, I agree with that. And from the Gartner reports that I've seen, and I agree with, like, a good balance. It's actually a pretty even split of 25% across those 4 categories: internal employers, ad budget, agencies and contractors, and ad tech. But what have you seen, and let's say, what distribution would you recommend, or do you have a preference of maybe leaning more in one than other?
Yeah. So from what I've seen in the industry, like strategies like cold email outbound, cold calling, things of that nature are becoming harder and harder. I mean, you and I, at least I do, I get tons of phone calls every day from numbers I don't know. I don't pick them up anymore. The screening technology is just becoming a lot more built in to, whether it's iPhone or Android. So people are avoiding those cold calls. People are avoiding emails. They're going to spam more often. I mean, let's face it, like a lot of the emails that are sent out in the first place, nobody really interprets their own marketing message as spam. But if you're sending untargeted communications that don't pick up on key pain points that people are facing, if they're not helpful in any way, like it sort of is spam in a way. So people are ignoring those messages. And I forget where I saw this stat, but I think it pretty much holds true. Like 95% of your market is not in buying mode at any point. 5% is. So it's a matter of like, hey, based on my targets, what my budget is, where can I find that 5% of the market that is in buying mode so that I don't have to focus my budget on the 95% that aren't. And some of that comes down to finding those bottom of funnel areas where people are actually searching for intent-driven keywords, whether it's like Google Ads, and then taking that Google Ad strategy and applying it to things like LinkedIn where you can get really specific on targeting to your ICP. Um, it's really a matter of like taking a look at those strategies that aren't working so well anymore and then adapting. And my belief, at least, is that marketing is a great place to take those strategies that aren't working because marketing is really your gateway to finding that in-market audience, showing them your message without, sending it to 95% of the market that isn't interested at all. And, I'm not saying that marketing to that 95% isn't important because it kind of is. Like you have to create awareness there so that when they actually go into buying mode, they know who you are when you reach out. But in terms of focusing your ad dollars, like if your company is saying like the KPIs for marketing are very outcome focused, so we want conversions, we want really highly qualified leads that are going to sales. If you're saying like, hey, I've generated this much awareness with this 95% of out of market audiences, I've gotten this number of impressions, like that's not going to be something that's going to make you successful in your job if you're coming to leadership with those sort of metrics. So it's really focusing on the KPIs that your leadership team is establishing for you, and then really giving them your opinion on what's going to work. Like navigating away from the strategies that aren't working anymore and saying, this is how marketing can assist you in deploying the strategies that do work.
No, I agree. It's not that I don't recommend to awareness, but it's just awareness thought differently than how most marketing agencies treat it. And what I mean by that is that if you're going to put budget in awareness, it has to be measured in a certain way, right? Not only with impressions and reach, but for example, how much is your remarketing pool growing with ICP folks, right? Like if you had a marketing pool of 100 people and now you grew that to 1,000, and those are within your ICP, I think there's value in doing that because now you have 100 people that are seeing hopefully valuable content, day in and day out. So there's a value in expanding your remarketing pool. Or for example, if you mentioned LinkedIn, right? If you have great video educational videos, or it could be even more bottom of the funnel videos, right? And if those videos are being watched by, even if it's 50 people that are within your ICP, and you can see, okay, yeah, 50 guys within my ICP saw more than half of this video last week, right? There's a value in that. But then just running, a campaign on autopilot with impressions as a main metric, that's not the way to do it.
Yeah, it's really easy as a marketer to get sidetracked by like high numbers. But if those numbers aren't in your ICP, they're meaningless and it's wasted ad spend. And part of, at least making leadership perceive you as successful is communicating what your goals are. It's not like generating the most amount of impressions. It's generating impressions within your target audience. If I can say I generated 1 million impressions, that's great. But if it's to people who are never going to be in buying mode, I'm just wasting your money.
Right. No, there's definitely a lot of, I would say, both educating the C-suite in terms of the strategy and the why. And also, aligning with them on that and then measuring yourself to that. And, with that said, what split do you like between awareness and, let's say, more bottom of the funnel tactics? For example, paid search, especially if high intent keywords, right? Do you recommend a certain split percentage-wise, and let's say in the ad budget, not to confuse the math?
I mean, for us, it's very highly focused on bottom of funnel. We're a company that is very partner focused. We have a very strong alliances function. So where we kind of sit is, hey, like we're a partner company that implements technologies, and a lot of these different platforms and technologies, they have their own marketing function to generate awareness. So it's how can we leverage our partner relationships to generate the awareness, that kind of takes it off of our plate to generate the awareness for that product. We can assist them with that, but generating awareness, high level awareness of the product isn't necessarily isn't our main initiative. It's leveraging our partners to do that in conjunction with them. We kind of rely on that partner channel a bit to generate that high funnel awareness because they're really good at doing that on the product side. But then because we implement the products, it's finding those intent categories where a customer is saying like, we want to implement this, that we're really looking for. So I'd say 90% of our ad spend is focused on those bottom of funnel conversions simply because that's what our leadership team values. That's the mission of, that our executive team has set out. So yeah, I always really focus on those bottom of funnel, high level intent keywords. I tend to look at categorize them into, keywords they can be commercial intent, they can be navigational intent, they can be informational intent, or they can be buying intent. Definitely try to focus on those buying intent keywords so that I can really focus on pipeline creation and marketing versus just high level awareness.
No, and I think I agree that in general that the number of 90% towards bottom funnel, high intent audience, it makes a lot of sense and it's common. I think each company is different in the sense that if you're growing with that approach and that strategy and it's working well, then why change it, right? And if you're happy with the growth that marketing has provided you in the last few years, you have a winning team. There's no need to change that, right? Until you get to the point that perhaps you have exhausted, let's say the universe of high buying intent keywords, right? Or they have become crazy expensive, which has happened, in the recent years in some instances, right? Hopefully, like if you have a mature paid media program, in particular a mature paid search program, you'll be able to continue to compete. You have enough learnings, right, to continue to leverage that channel. But then, again, that exhaustion point, is that even the right word? Or let's say the point of diminishing returns is different from each company, but I do think that teams need to be aware of when you're reaching that point to start diversifying a little bit, right? In other channels.
Absolutely.
Matt, and when we talked about at the beginning, we're talking about building a lean team, making sure that you're not overspending or underspending in any of the four main categories of the budget type of cost. And also, we said, okay, especially if you're in market, focus on generating leads, because otherwise, leadership is not going to give you that budget for too long, But other than that, what, we talk about the concept before starting. We talk about the concept of a full stack marketer and how important that is in today's world, especially for mid-market, right? So I love if you elaborate on that.
Yeah, so what I look for when I think of full stack marketer, really making sure that it's one person that not only can strategize all the aspects of your outbound go-to-market initiatives, but also do them. That includes web development, it includes content creation, it includes placing paid ads, it includes working with partners and alliances to make sure that you're all aligning on how you're going to market. Involves aligning with the sales team to make sure that your marketing initiatives are also aligning with what they're focusing on. So it's really, graphic design, visual design. It's really looking a lot of times for a unicorn, like somebody who's capable of all those things. But then also, we talked about the idea of outsourcing. There's going to be times when certain projects come up that maybe you're not going to have bandwidth to do. So it's also being able to delegate tasks and manage those tasks with outside vendors, understanding what the undertaking is for time and what the budget should be for that particular initiative. So for me, a full stack marketer really encompasses all of those things. Can be difficult to find sometimes, but as budgets, get lower and lower in marketing as AI continues to take over, because AI is definitely something I've incorporated into my toolkit. I feel it makes me a better full stack marketer because it just helps me with certain tasks, certain aspects of coming up with content ideas. It's great for. It's really good for maybe tuning up a paragraph of text that you wrote that you don't think is really where you want it to be. But yeah, I think those are all aspects that makes a good full stack marketer, and I think they're going to become more and more demand as marketing teams get smaller and smaller and budgets get lower and lower.
I agree. I think another way of putting it, because as you mentioned, right, I know some people listening will think, oh, great, now I have to find a unicorn. But I think more like the message is, instead of spending, let's say, 50K a year in somebody that it's right out of college, spend 100 in somebody that have a lot of years of experience and across teams, because you're gonna get more out of those 100 than what you're gonna get out of 50. Like it's more value there, as you mentioned, especially now with AI, where essentially the things that are, and I always tell this to the team. I explained in the last podcast also, like, we decided to end our internship program, because if something is being done by an intern, it's probably a heavy sign that should be automated or done with AI in the first place. So I do think the value of entry-level people, at least, with the skills that we have seen for the last 10 years, and if that changes and they embrace AI, maybe that will change. But at least today, the value of entry-level people has gone way down. And especially, again, for mid-market companies, it makes way more sense to have a full stack marketer in charge that can oversee a lot of things, that can outsource certain things, that can do certain things with AI, that can solve things by themselves, as you're saying, talking to a Google rep or understanding what a good design and differentiate from a bad design. Like, it's really valuable to have all of that in one person, even if the salary is significantly higher.
Yeah, and I think we kind of touched on it, but it totally depends on the type of company. Like, there's, of course, enterprise companies I would not recommend to be run by a single marketing person, but like we kind of touched on earlier, it's I think it's borne out by the revenue, to have that bigger team. But where those, full stack marketers fit really well are the lower revenue companies that can't have, a massive team where each person is specialized on content writing, and then you have one person for web development, and then you have one person to run your marketing operations in the automation tool. Those are the companies where, yeah, a full stack marketer makes a ton of sense.
And you mentioned outsourcing certain tasks. Like, in your experience, what channels or what criteria do you use, or can people use, to determine what things they should be trying to outsource versus keeping in-house?
Yeah, some of it comes down to, for me personally, I try and take a look at the things that I feel like my strengths are in. Those are the things I'm going to insource. And then the things that aren't my strengths, you know, if the budget allows, those are things that maybe I can outsource. If they're things that I think will be done better by an outsourced firm, if I can attach like tangible outcomes to that, to say like I really think that if we outsource this particular aspect that I don't think is my strength, that this is going to lead to this ROI outcome over time. Might not be immediate, but over time, I think that this is actually going to be a better use of my time to take this off my plate. And that's going to be completely dependent on what sort of budget realities there are. There's certain times when I might insource something that I don't think is particularly my strength, but at the moment, it's just something that makes sense from a budget perspective. So yeah, completely comes down to the circumstances of where you're at in terms of budget, with what you think your strengths lie, where you think your weaknesses lie. That's really how I take a look at what I'm going to insource or outsource as a full stack marketer. Because, we do use the term full stack marketer, but there is a visual you could create where it's like, okay, like I can do this, but it's not my strength. And then I can do this, but that's my strength. And it would kind of create like a star that would show you, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. I can do them all, but this is maybe where I should lean towards the idea of outsourcing versus doing it myself.
Yeah, I think a lot of times marketing executives are hesitant or afraid of outsourcing more than I think they should in the sense that they probably see the perfect scenario, right? It's like, well, no, if I build this in-house, in the long run, it's gonna be better, better value, etc. But again, there's a lot more risk, right? You don't have the knowledge, as you mentioned. I think that understanding what skill you already have, it's important. And also, there's a lot of times, time is money, right? Then you spend 6 months trying to build something, it didn't work, and it's not about the salary that you pay the person or that you didn't pay the outsourcer or the external agency. Is you wasted 6 months and you still didn't, let's say, put together a paid search program in place, or you still didn't create the ABM, V1 of your program that you wanted to create. So by bringing outsider, you can do that quickly and there's low risk. Most contractors, agencies, they won't make you sign a long-term contract, right? It's usually month to month or a quarter, or let's say 6 months at most. So there's low risk. If they don't work, you move on and you learn quickly, and at least you know what not to do. But when you're doing that in-house, it's just like everything delays, and that's really, to me, the real risk and what I see a lot of times going wrong.
Yeah, and I'd say most of the companies that I outsource to have kind of merged the service model with the SaaS model. So they'll literally have like an interface that you log into to make requests. It's a month-to-month contract. Like I said, it is a service, but it really has the front end feel of a SaaS application that you're logging into to get all your stuff done. I think like when you talk more on the enterprise side or bigger mid-market companies, the typical marketing executive is really going to be worried that this outsourced agency isn't going to understand our voice. It's not going to understand our brand. It's not going to understand our values or our goals. And I think that's definitely a reasonable concern. But if you are setting up a relationship where you're going to have more of a long-term relationship, it is just important to make sure that that outsourced agency understands your voice and your goals. And they should really, have the philosophy that they try to act as an extension of your team. So they should really feel like an employee that you can delegate to. They should really feel like somebody, that you think of as a colleague, not an outsourced agency. There should be a lot of alignment between you.
Yeah, I agree. That's, for example, in our agency, like we live in the product management system of our clients, our BA, and they can chat and ping us, more than, what a lot of agencies do is just like once a week status call, and that's it, right? You need to truly make everyone feel like that you are there, right? That you're part of the team. That's one thing. Also, I do think that there needs to be someone on the internal team at a relatively high position that has continuity and will be there for a good amount of years. In other words, right, if I am part of a C-suite and in the marketing team, everybody is new, and I have no guarantee that those people are going to stay. Even the leader of the team is not going to stay for a while. I need to fix that problem, or I need to get there myself and understand, get my hands dirty and understand what's being done and the learnings, because then it's going to be an evolving, rotating door of internal folks or contractors or agencies. And that's really expensive, in the sense that you're not even learning from the mistakes you're making, or from all of the work that you're doing throughout the years. So that to me, that needs to be there. A person that they trust, that is going to be there for the long run. That probably means you have to pay that person well, or being somebody that's already there for a while, that has skin in the game, and that you can trust, because that again, can go wrong if it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I'll say, in the times that I have had to outsource longer term, I always go back to people I have relationships with, at least for the initial outreach, to make sure they have an opportunity to win the business, because they're people I've worked with before, they're people I trust. I know they've been there for a long time. They're going to be a point of contact who understands what I'm trying to achieve. So I always go back to people I've worked with in the past, and I also trust my network to give recommendations for people who are going to offer those sort of services, where it's very much a partnership versus a vendor relationship.
Makes sense, Matt. And we also discussed a little bit before the podcast about the importance of now for the marketing to be effective. We talked about the team, but now, okay, for the marketing collateral, the messaging, what's being put out there, with all of the noise today, with all of the competition sending emails, call outreach, etc., right? It's important that you truly know your target audience, right? So whether that's a cold email or a paid ad or a welcome email, if it's, that it resonates, right? So what has worked for you, and what do you recommend so people know their target audience better and therefore can create messaging that can resonate?
Yeah, at the risk of sounding kind of generic, I always just try and act like somebody who's in my target market. So I'll subscribe to the newsletters that they would read. I'll read the publications that they would read. I set up Google Alerts to make sure that I'm just ingesting content that they're looking at. And what that's going to allow you to do is figure out what sort of pains and challenges they're facing. So that all of my messaging is going to be focused on how are ways that we solve that pain, how are ways that we solve that challenge. And that's really going to help you write your message in a way that's relevant, because everybody's looking at ways to solve their challenges. They're all looking at ways to solve their pains. They all want to be more successful at work. And if we can frame our solution in a manner that says, this is what's going to minimize your pain and help you be successful at work, that's a message that's going to resonate with them. So, I had a previous boss this was a while ago, but it's a message that stuck with me. And I think it was specifically around a trade show booth that we were developing. And at that point, I was writing some copy for it. And I wrote some copy, and he told me, well, any of our competitors could say that. And that was like kind of such an obvious thing, but I think it's very useful, and it's something I've used almost everywhere I could, where, yeah, if our competitor can say this, it's not going to resonate. So it's digging down to what really makes us different. How can I write that message in a way that our competitor couldn't? And sometimes, like, I'd say you're more lucky where you work at a company that has a great product, that makes that task a lot easier. But it really does come down to, hey, how can I write this copy or this message or this value prop in a way that other people couldn't? And that's going to really resonate, and it's going to differentiate you. And it's going to be the first people that people think of when they think of your brand. At Penrod, fortunately, that's something that I've had the opportunity to do, because we're very unique in the sense that we're a Salesforce consultant that focuses primarily on healthcare, pretty much completely on healthcare. And that's something that not a lot of consultants do. A lot of consultants are more generalists, and it's really great to be working at a company where that's actually an easy thing to do, is to write a value prop in a way that your competitors can't.
So, for example, in your case, then, and so people can visualize a little bit, you would, in the first part, which is knowing the target audience better, right? You would, your target audience is people in healthcare that are in the IT department.
Yeah, so It's difficult because depending on the offering that we have, like our offerings are almost cross-departmental. So it could be somebody in business development at a hospital. It could be somebody in more of a clinical side. It could be somebody in operations. It could be somebody in, on the financial team, like a chief financial officer who's like, hey, our margins are really low right now. How can I look at getting those better? There's specific ways and there's specific things that are making those margins low. So if you can take our solutions and say, these are actual things that will improve your margins, that's going to be a message that's going to resonate with the CFO. So, it's not only looking at, one particular offering that we offer, like it's writing those ICPs for every single offering that we have, every single tangible application, because when you identify, an ICP and a pain point and a solution that we have, that's a marketing campaign. And there's multiple ways you can go about that. You create ads, you could create a message for our AEs to take to the market. It could be taking it to the channel to say this is a new offering that leverages your product. Everything really that we do in a marketing capacity is derived from who are those ICPs and what do they care about and what are their pains. So that's really how I take a look at creating marketing messaging.
Yeah. So it's defining those, and then as you mentioned, right? Then you would, for example, you mentioned the CFO could be one, right? Then you say, okay, what are CFOs in the healthcare industry reading, right? And then you start reading that, right, to understand them a little bit better. And you probably have to pick maybe 2 or 3 personas, let's say, because you're gonna learn, you're gonna sign up, you're gonna get in the heads of 10, 15 people either, right? So as you mentioned, it probably depends on company to company.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Matt, anything else that I haven't asked that you think that you want to share, that you think people would benefit from listening?
Yeah, this is an obvious one too. I think I kind of missed it when we were talking about the last topic about how do you understand your audience. One of the best audiences you have are your existing customers. So make sure you're reaching out to them and asking, what's important to you, what are your challenges day to day. That's instead of just reading newsletters and publications and thought leaders online, that's somebody you can literally talk to and have a conversation with. And it's such a valuable source of information to help you, because if they're a customer, at some point they had a pain that you solved. So how can I take that success and replicate it in a marketing campaign? So definitely, rely on your existing customers to help inform that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's also an underrated approach. You kill a lot of birds with one stone. They'll tell you if something is not working with the service that you're giving them, so you can fix it, in time. And yeah, you have firsthand insights, from a very qualitative perspective of things that for sure are happening, in the rest of the industry. So yeah. I think that's
absolutely.
Well, Matt, it's been great to have you. Thank you for coming, and I'm sure people will appreciate it as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Carlos. It was good.
Thanks for listening to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast. If you enjoyed it, remember to subscribe for future episodes. Until next time.